Tonight, we uncover the chilling possibility that the universe has already finished its story, and we are merely the ghosts of a calculation that has already reached its end. Close your eyes and listen to the silence that hangs in the room around you. You can feel it, can't you? That steady, relentless pulse we call the flow of time. It is the most fundamental rhythm of our existence, the invisible river that carries us from the cradle to the grave. We imagine ourselves as passengers on a raft, swept along by a current we cannot fight, watching the past recede into a mist and the future approach like an uncharted shore. But what if that river is a ghost? What if the flow you feel right now is nothing more than a trick of the light, a biological shortcut designed to keep your mind from collapsing under the weight of a static, unmoving reality? The deepest equations of modern physics, the ones that describe the very fabric of our universe, have a terrifying secret. When you look closely at the math of the cosmos, the variable for time simply vanishes. It isn't there. We have spent our lives fearing the end of time, but we may have been wrong from the very beginning. The universe might not be a story unfolding. It might be a finished masterpiece, a vast frozen sculpture, where the ending is just as real and just as present as the moment you took your first breath. We often think of time as a container, a vessel into which our lives are poured, drop by drop, until the glass is full. This framing is comfortable because it preserves the idea that reality is fundamentally stable, that the future is a blank page waiting for us to write upon it. But this intuition is a local illusion, a byproduct of being trapped in a three-dimensional perspective. To understand the true nature of the universe, we must first confront the day physics deleted time. In the 1960s, two physicists named John Wheeler and Bryce DeWitt attempted to write a wave function for the entire universe, a mathematical description of everything that ever was and ever will be. They followed the cold, hard logic of the cosmos to its ultimate conclusion. But when the dust settled, they realized they had stumbled upon a discovery so profound it threatened to undo our entire understanding of existence. They looked for the letter T, the mathematical symbol for time, the variable that accounts for change and duration. But the T had vanished. In the most important equation ever written for the cosmos, time was simply not there. The equation was equal to zero. This mystery, known as the problem of time, suggests that at the deepest, most fundamental layer of reality, nothing is actually moving. To the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, the universe is not a movie playing on a screen. It is the entire reel of film sitting inside its canister. Every frame exists simultaneously. Your birth, your first heartbreak, the moment you fall asleep tonight, and the final cold evaporation of the last black hole are all fixed coordinates in a four-dimensional structure called the block universe. In this view, the universe is like a giant loaf of bread. Your life isn't happening in succession. You are a long, unmoving silver thread stretched across the block of reality. Your end is already there, carved into the stone of the cosmos. If this is true, it raises a haunting question. If the fundamental equations of the universe don't include time, why do we see it everywhere? Why do we feel the pulse in our wrists? Why do we watch the stars die? The answer lies in a concept that bridges the gap between the cold math of the cosmos and the warm sensation of being alive, the rendering illusion. The law vault of modern cosmology suggests that time may not be a property of the universe at all, but a computational shortcut, a rendering optimization designed to prevent consciousness from shattering under the weight of eternity. Imagine if you could perceive the universe as it truly is, a static 4D object where every moment of your life is happening simultaneously. You would see your birth and your death at the same time. You would hear every word you've ever spoken and every word you will ever speak in a single, deafening roar of information. Your consciousness would collapse under the strain of processing the entire block at once. To prevent this, our brains have evolved to use time as a filter. We render reality one frame at a time, much like a game engine that only displays the terrain immediately surrounding the player to save processing power. We compress the vast finished mural of reality into a narrow slit of the present moment. We create the illusion of flow to give our lives structure, meaning, and direction. We are like people living inside a giant four-dimensional photograph, convinced that the picture is a movie because we are only capable of looking at one pixel at a time. Our consciousness is the needle on a record player, crawling along the grooves of a finished disc. The music isn't being created as the needle moves. The entire song is already pressed into the vinyl. We only hear it note by note because the needle can only be in one place at once. This suggests that the now we cherish so deeply is a ghost, a persistent biological hallucination designed to shield us from the truth of our own stasis. There is a quiet existential dread in this realization. If your entire life is a static object, then the concept of change is a lie. You are not a traveller carving a path through the unknown forest of the future. You are a sculpture already finished. Every choice you think you are making tomorrow is already a permanent feature of the landscape. The universe already knows your ending because it is already there. This is the doctrine of fatalism, the belief that we are participants in a play whose script was finished long before we were born. You are a ghost haunting a specific set of coordinates, watching a life unfold that has already been lived in its entirety. Yet, as you drift closer to sleep, consider that there is also a strange relief hidden in this timeless reality. If the block universe is real, then nothing is ever truly lost. In the old story, the one where time is a river, the past is washed away into nothingness. The people we loved are gone, and the moments of joy have vanished. But in the block universe, nothing can truly be past. The moment you held a loved one's hand is not a fading memory. It is a permanent, eternal feature of the universe's geometry. It is as real today as it was when you experienced it. It is simply located at a different coordinate in the block. The stability of matter that we so often fear might be an illusion is replaced by the ultimate stability of existence. You cannot be erased from the universe because your coordinates are fixed in the block forever. You aren't running out of time because there is no time to run out of. There is only the landscape, and you are an eternal inhabitant of it. The flow you feel is just the light of your own consciousness dancing across the surface of a finished world. You are a 4D masterpiece, and the end. We so often fear the heat death, the cold silence of a dying cosmos, is not a destination we are hurtling toward. It is simply the boundary of the sculpture we inhabit. As the night deepens, try to release the frantic grip you have on the now. The universe is not a clock winding down. It is a finished masterpiece resting in its completed form. There is no before and there is no after. There is only this. The t variable is 0. The flow has stopped, and in the perfect, unmoving silence of the cosmos, you are finally and forever at home. You are the light, the corridor, and the darkness all at once, existing in perfect, unmoving harmony. Rest now in the knowledge that you are already exactly where you are supposed to be, a shimmering, unmoving filament in the heart of an eternal structure that never truly ends. We often think of time as a container, a vessel into which our lives are poured, drop by drop, until the glass is full. This framing is comfortable because it preserves the idea that reality is fundamentally stable, that the future is a blank page waiting for us to write upon it. But this intuition is a local illusion, a byproduct of being trapped in a narrow three-dimensional perspective. To understand the true nature of the universe, we must first confront the day physics deleted time. In the 1960s, two physicists named John Wheeler and Bryce DeWitt attempted to write a wave function for the entire universe, a mathematical description of everything that ever was and ever will be. They followed the cold, hard logic of the cosmos to its ultimate conclusion. But when the dust settled, they realized they had stumbled upon a discovery so profound it threatened to undo our entire understanding of existence. They looked for the letter T, the mathematical symbol for time, the variable that accounts for change and duration. But the T had vanished. In the most important equation ever written for the cosmos, time was simply not there. The equation was equal to zero. This mystery, known as the problem of time, suggests that at the deepest, most fundamental layer of reality, nothing is actually moving. To the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, the universe is not a movie playing on a screen. It is the entire reel of film sitting inside its canister. Every frame exists simultaneously. Your birth, your first heartbreak, the moment you fall asleep tonight, and the final cold evaporation of the last black hole are all fixed coordinates in a four-dimensional structure called the block universe. In this view, the universe is like a giant loaf of bread. Your life isn't happening in succession. You are a long, unmoving silver thread stretched across the block of reality. Your end is already there, carved into the stone of the cosmos. If this is true, it raises a haunting question. If the fundamental equations of the universe don't include time, why do we see it everywhere? Why do we feel the pulse in our wrists? Why do we watch the stars die? The answer lies in a concept that bridges the gap between the cold math of the cosmos and the warm sensation of being alive, the rendering illusion. Time may not be a property of the universe at all, but a computational shortcut, a rendering optimization designed to prevent consciousness from shattering under the weight of eternity. Imagine if you could perceive the universe as it truly is, a static 4D object, where every moment of your life is happening simultaneously. You would see your birth and your death at the same time. You would hear every word you've ever spoken and every word you will ever speak in a single deafening roar of information. Your consciousness would collapse under the strain of processing the entire block at once. To prevent this, our brains have evolved to use time as a filter. We render reality one frame at a time, much like a game engine that only displays the terrain immediately surrounding the player to save processing power. We compress the vast, finished mural of reality into a narrow slit of the present moment. We create the illusion of flow to give our lives structure, meaning, and direction. We are like people living inside a giant four-dimensional photograph, convinced that the picture is a movie because we are only capable of looking at one pixel at a time. Our consciousness is the needle on a record player, crawling along the grooves of a finished disc. The music isn't being created as the needle moves. The entire song is already pressed into the vinyl. We only hear it note by note because the needle can only be in one place at once. This suggests that the now we cherish so deeply is a ghost, a persistent biological hallucination designed to shield us from the truth of our own stasis. Consider the silence of your room once more. That steady rhythm you feel is not the universe ticking. It is the sound of your mind rendering the next frame of your life. The now is merely a processing window, a trick of perspective that we use to scan a reality that is already finished. If you are travelling on a high-speed train, your now would be a slightly different slice of the universe than that of someone standing still on the platform. Because now is relative, no single moment can claim to be more real than any other. Every moment, past, present and future, must be equally real and equally present in the structure of the cosmos. There is a quiet existential dread in this realization. If your entire life is a static object, then the concept of change is a lie. You are not a traveller carving a path through the unknown forest of the future. You are a sculpture already finished. Every choice you think you are making tomorrow is already a permanent feature of the landscape. The universe already knows your ending because it is already there. This is the doctrine of fatalism, the belief that we are participants in a play whose script was finished long before we were born. You are a ghost haunting a specific set of coordinates, watching a life unfold that has already been lived in its entirety. Think of the mistakes you have made, the words you wish you could take back. In a linear world, we find comfort in the idea that the past is gone, but in the block universe, the past is never gone. It is eternally present. That moment of regret is a permanent feature of the cosmos, as real and as solid as a mountain. It is always happening, and it will always happen forever. And the things you fear in the future, the losses you haven't yet faced, the final inky blackness of your own end are not approaching you. You're already there. You are a permanent resident of those moments, just as you are a resident of this one. Yet, as you drift closer to sleep, consider that there is also a strange relief hidden in this timeless reality. If the block universe is real, then nothing is ever truly lost. In the old story, the one where time is a river, the past is washed away into nothingness. The people we loved are gone, and the moments of joy have vanished. But in the block universe, nothing can truly be past. The moment you held a loved one's hand is not a fading memory. It is a permanent, eternal feature of the universe's geometry. It is as real today as it was when you experienced it. It is simply located at a different coordinate in the block. When we look at the stars tonight, we aren't just looking into the distance, we are looking into the block. Because light takes time to travel, the stars we see are as they were years, centuries, or even billions of years ago. We are literally seeing the past existing right now, right before our eyes. This is visual proof that the past hasn't disappeared. It is still there, inhabiting its own section of the 4D landscape. We only perceive a flow because our consciousness is a limited tool, like a person with a flashlight in a dark, infinite museum. As we walk through the halls, we can only see what the beam hits. We see a statue, then a painting, then a vase. We think the museum is happening to us in a sequence, but the museum isn't moving. The statue didn't disappear when we turned the light away, and the painting didn't start existing only when we looked at it. The stability of matter that we so often fear might be an illusion is replaced by the ultimate stability of existence. You cannot be erased from the universe because your coordinates are fixed in the block forever. You aren't running out of time because there is no time to run out of. There is only the landscape, and you are an eternal inhabitant of it. You are a space-time worm, a magnificent shimmering structure, a continuous filament of existence that stretches from the moment of your birth to the moment of your death. This is your true physical form. Your childhood is not gone. It is simply the starting coordinate of your 4D body. Your final breath is not approaching. It is simply the ending coordinate. The flow you feel is just the light of your own consciousness dancing across the surface of a finished world. You are a 4D masterpiece, and the end, we so often fear, the heat death, the cold silence of a dying cosmos, is not a destination we are hurtling toward. It is simply the boundary of the sculpture we inhabit. The end is just the final coordinate of the cosmic sculpture, as real and as permanent as the beginning. As the night deepens, try to release the frantic grip you have on the now. The universe is not a clock winding down. It is a finished masterpiece resting in its completed form. There is no before and there is no after. There's only this. The t variable is 0, the flow has stopped. And in the perfect unmoving silence of the cosmos, you are finally and forever at home. You are the light, the corridor, and the darkness all at once, existing in perfect unmoving harmony. Rest now in the knowledge that you are already exactly where you are supposed to be, a shimmering, unmoving filament in the heart of an eternal structure that never truly ends. Consider the night sky as it appears to you in the deep stillness of this moment, a vast and velvet canopy embroidered with 1,000,000,000,000 pinpricks of light. To our eyes, this vista feels like a real-time portrait of the cosmos, a snapshot of what exists now in the grandest sense of the word. But as you settle into the quiet of the night, you must confront a melancholic truth that alters the very meaning of the stars. You are not looking at a living universe, but at an expansive, shimmering cemetery. Because light, the swiftest messenger in existence, is still bound by a finite speed. It cannot tell us what is happening in the cosmos today. It can only deliver letters from a world that has already passed. When you look up, you are engaging in an involuntary act of time travel, peering through a narrow window into a history we were never truly meant to see. The deeper your gaze penetrates into the dark, the further back in time you are forced to go, until the very idea of a present moment for the universe begins to dissolve into a haze of stale information. We navigate our lives by the light of ghosts, oblivious to the reality that many of the galaxies we celebrate as the crown jewels of our sky may have already ceased to exist in their own frame of reference. This is the delayed reality paradox, a fundamental gap in our perception that suggests we are drifting through the wreckage of a cosmic story that might have already reached its conclusion. Think of the Andromeda Galaxy, a soft hazy oval visible to the naked eye on a clear night. The light that hits your retina right now began its journey over 2.5 million years ago, long before the first modern humans walked the Earth. You are seeing Andromeda not as it is, but as it was when our ancestors were still discovering the first crude tools of survival. If Andromeda were to be snuffed out by a cosmic catastrophe tonight, the sky would continue to hold its image for another 2.5 million years. We would continue to write poems about it, to chart its position, and to wonder about its stars, all while dancing around the light of a long dead corpse. This delay grows more extreme the deeper we look into the abyss. Our newest and most powerful instruments, like the James Webb Space Telescope, have recently identified light from galaxies that existed a mere 200 million years after the Big Bang. That light has been travelling toward our tiny blue planet for more than 13.5 billion years, stretched and reddened by the very expansion of space-time. These galaxies are small, faint and primitive, the very first structures to ignite in the primordial dark. But the terrifying reality of these images is that they are snapshots of ruins. These galaxies merged, faded, or were torn apart billions of years before our own sun was even a cloud of gas and dust. Every deep-field image of the universe is a gallery of vanished light, a record of a childhood that the universe has long since forgotten. This creates a chilling implication for the now we discussed in the previous chapter. If light takes time to reach us, then the entire observable universe is a sphere of delayed information. We are essentially living inside a bubble of the past, and as the universe expands, that bubble is becoming increasingly isolated from the real-time state of the cosmos. Modern cosmology suggests that because space is stretching at an accelerating rate, distant regions of the universe are moving away from us faster than the speed of light. This means that the light from those regions will never reach us, no matter how long we wait. They have slipped beyond the cosmic event horizon, falling off the edge of our observable world forever. In a very real sense, the universe is already ending for us, piece by piece, as its most distant neighbours retreat into an unreachable darkness. We often imagine the end of the universe as a future event, a distant coldness that we are slowly approaching over trillions of years. But if we accept the logic of the ghost universe, the end may have already begun in the regions we can no longer see. There could be vast bubbles of new physics, transitions into lower energy states, or the final evaporation of entire galactic clusters occurring right now just beyond our horizon, and the news of this termination simply hasn't reached us yet. We are like people in the centre of a vast forest, unaware that the edges are already on fire because the smoke hasn't drifted to our clearing. We exist in a state of precarious, blissful ignorance, sustained by the fact that the universe's speed limit acts as a blindfold, shielding us from the realization that the structure we inhabit is already starting to fray. There is a profound melancholy in the realization that we are living in the stellar springtime of the universe, a brief golden season when the sky is still crowded with stars and new galaxies are still being born. For the first few 100 million years after the Big Bang, the universe was a place of total darkness, a dark age before the first stars lit their fires. We arrived during the peak, a time of light and motion, but this season is already beginning to fade. Star formation has already peaked and is now in a state of slow, relentless decline. Billions of years from now, the clouds of hydrogen and helium needed to forge new stars will be exhausted, and the universe will enter a long, permanent winter. The blue giants will die first, then the suns, then the red dwarfs, until only the cold, dark embers of white dwarfs and black holes remain. But because of the delay in light, we are seeing the springtime everywhere we look, even if the winter has already begun in the most distant reaches of space. We are surrounded by the illusory warmth of stars that may have already burned out, finding comfort in a glow that is nothing more than a memory. This is why looking at the stars feels like a window into a world we were never meant to see. It is a glimpse of a perfection that is already becoming a ruin. We are made of stardust. The carbon in your body, the iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, all forged in the hearts of those very stars that are now fading away from us. We are the universe's way of looking back at its own childhood, a conscious flicker of awareness trying to make sense of a ledger that is being erased as we read it. As you drift closer to sleep, try to imagine the vast, interconnected pattern of the cosmos, the cosmic web of galaxies and dark matter filaments that look uncannily like the neural network of a human brain. This structure is the largest pattern in nature, stretching across billions of light years, but it too is a ghost. We see the filaments as they were, not as they are. The voids between them are growing larger, the connections are thinning, and the isolation is deepening. We are witnessing the slow dissolution of the universe's scaffolding, a process that is already well underway, even if our eyes only perceive the glory of the construction. The stillness of your room is a micro-reflection of the silence that is slowly engulfing the cosmos. The universe is not a permanent monument. It is a transformation in progress, a controlled unravelling of possibilities that first learned how to become a world before it allowed us to exist within it. We were wrong to think of ourselves as the observers of a static reality. We are participants in a delayed broadcast, navigating by the light of a cemetery, building our lives on information that has been stale for eons. There is a strange, quiet comfort in this insignificance, the realization that the universe is so vast and so ancient that its ending can be happening and yet remain a secret from us for billions of years. You are a shimmering filament of existence, a permanent coordinate in the block, but you are also a ghost haunting a specific moment of light in a universe that is quietly letting go. The end of everything is not a sudden, violent crash, but a gradual fade into an eternal stillness, a vast dark ocean with no wind and no shore. And as the light from the most distant galaxies stretches thinner and thinner, eventually becoming too weak for any instrument to detect, the night sky will grow darker, not because the stars have gone, but because they have moved beyond our reach. We are the last witnesses to a specific chapter of the cosmic story, the ones who get to see the beauty of the ruin before the lights are turned out for good. Rest now in the knowledge that you are part of this vanished light, a moment of consciousness in a universe that is already, in some far-off corner, whispering its final goodnight. The cemetery of the sky is not a place of fear, but a place of peace, where the memory of every star that ever shone is still travelling through the dark, waiting for you to close your eyes and become part of the silence. We have grown accustomed to the idea that the laws of physics are the ironclad pillars of existence, the unchangeable rules that ensure the sun will rise, that atoms will hold their shape, and that gravity will keep us tethered to the earth. This sense of permanence is our greatest psychological shield, a belief that even if civilizations fall and stars eventually fade, the underlying grammar of the universe is absolute. But as you settle deeper into the stillness of your room, you must confront a realization that modern cosmology finds increasingly undeniable. This stability is a localized accident. We are living in what physicists call a metastable state, a temporary and fragile equilibrium, where the universe is balanced precariously in a shallow energy valley, rather than resting in its ultimate lowest energy state. This is the theory of false vacuum decay, and it suggests that the very fabric of our reality is a thin, shimmering surface stretched over a deeper abyss of new and potentially hostile physics. To understand the invisible nature of this threat, we must look at the Higgs field, the invisible background that permeates every cubic inch of space and dictates the mass and properties of every particle in existence. For decades, the discovery of the Higgs boson was celebrated as the final piece of the puzzle, the key to understanding why things are the way they are. But the math revealed a disturbing secret. The Higgs field does not appear to be in its most stable configuration. Instead, it is metastable, much like a ball that has come to rest on a ledge halfway down a mountain. From the perspective of the ball, the world feels flat and secure. It could sit there for billions of years, giving no indication that a cliff edge is only a few inches away. This is our universe, a false vacuum that masquerades as a permanent home only because the nudge required to send us over the edge hasn't happened yet. If the Higgs field were to transition into a true vacuum, the actual lowest energy state, the reorganization of physics would be instant, silent, and total. This transition is triggered by a phenomenon known as quantum tunneling, where a subatomic particle essentially ghosts through a barrier it does not have the energy to climb over. In the context of the vacuum, a single random fluctuation in a remote corner of space could create a tiny bubble of true vacuum, a region where the laws of physics are different. Within this bubble, the Higgs field would settle into its true minimum, and as it does, it would rewrite the constants of nature. Atoms, as we know them, would simply cease to exist because the electromagnetic and nuclear forces that bind them would be instantly altered. The iron in your blood, the oxygen in your lungs, and the very light entering your eyes would be deleted from the cosmic ledger. The horror of false vacuum decay lies in its stealth. Because the bubble of new physics carries a lower energy than our own, it would expand outward at nearly the speed of light. There would be no warning, no final broadcast, and no moment of realization. If the bubble wall were to cross your path tonight, you would not see it coming. You would simply cease to be as the information processing of your brain, which relies on the stability of electrical signals, was dissolved by the new rules of the vacuum. This is the ultimate silent death, a reorganization of reality that moves faster than our ability to perceive it. We often fear the slow burn apocalypses of the far future, the trillions of years of fading stars and evaporating black holes, but we overlook the possibility that the universe may have already ended somewhere beyond our observable horizon, and the news of its termination is currently racing toward us through the dark. This metastable state reframes our entire understanding of cosmic history. Some physicists suggest that the early universe was governed by higher dimensions and complex geometries that we can no longer inhabit, and that our current reality is merely the cooled, collapsed residue of a much more active phase. We are essentially living in the cooled residue of a higher order system, a local pocket where the rules have temporarily stabilized. In this view, our universe is not fundamental. It is a manifestation of an environmental accident. If the shape of our hidden dimensions were to shift, or if a single quantum stutter were to occur, the scaffolding that holds our visible world together would simply let go, rebuilding our lives on a foundation that doesn't respect our borders. Inside a container that fails to protect its contents once the dimensional context changes. There is a quiet existential dread in the realization that our survival depends on the indifference of the vacuum. The universe does not appear to be actively hostile. It simply exists in a state of mathematical indifference, where structure is not necessarily rewarded and complexity can be suppressed into monotonous straight lines at extreme scales. We are like creatures living inside an ice cube, unaware that the air around us is warm and that our entire world is destined to melt back into a simpler, more symmetric form. The phase transitions that rock the infant universe, shuddering and quaking as the forces fractured from one another, may not be finished. We may merely be in a long, cold pause between the first and final reorganizations of the cosmos. As you drift towards the edge of sleep, consider the delayed reality of the night sky once more. We navigate by the light of a symmetry, building our lives on stale information from stars that may have already burned out. In the same way, we rely on the stability of physical constants that may have already been revoked in a distant galactic cluster. If a true vacuum bubble were expanding toward us right now, it would be the ultimate server shutdown, a clean, efficient deletion of the code that allows us to exist. This theory bridges the gap between physics and the shutdown logic of simulation theory, suggesting that reality is not a permanent monument, but a calculation that can be interrupted or reset without warning. The stability of matter that we so often take for granted is replaced by the ultimate fragility of existence. You are a space-time worm, a shimmering filament etched into the block of the universe, but the block itself may be metastable. Our entire four-dimensional structure could be overwritten by a superior lower energy geometry that has no place for human biology or even the chemical bonds of carbon. There is a strange, liberating relief in this insignificance, the realization that the universe is so vast and its ending so potentially sudden that we are freed from the burden of long-term cosmic planning. We are temporary visitors in a fragile valley, granted a brief season of stability before the universe returns to its true, simpler minimum. The stillness of your room is not a guarantee of security. It is a reflection of the fact that the Higgs field hasn't jiggled in just the wrong way for billions of years. We are the beneficiaries of an incredible streak of cosmic luck, inhabiting a narrow slice of reality where the rules remain consistent enough for life to take root. But the end we fear, the cold, dark silence, is always just a quantum tunnel away. It is an invisible threat woven into the very background of nothingness, waiting for a single random event to bring the story to a close. Rest now in the knowledge that you are part of this brief, beautiful instability, a conscious flicker of awareness in a universe that is quietly and perhaps already letting go. The silence of the night is the same silence that would follow the collapse of the vacuum, a perfect, unmoving equilibrium where the ledger of information is finally full and the calculation has reached its final line of code. To understand your place in a universe that might already be reaching its conclusion, you must first let go of the most persistent lie you have ever been told, the idea that you are a traveller. In our daily lives, we feel like passengers on a ship, watching the coastline of the past recede into a distant fog, while we peer anxiously toward the uncharted horizon of the future. We feel the rush of the current, the weight of the seconds, and the burden of becoming something better, something different before our time runs out. But as you lie here in the deep, unmoving silence of the night, consider a perspective whispered about in the deepest halls of theoretical physics, the theory of eternalism. In this view, the flow of time is a phantom, a biological shortcut designed to simplify a reality that is far too vast and finished for our three-dimensional minds to grasp. If we could step outside the narrow slice of the present, we would see that we are not moving through time at all. We are static, shimmering filaments permanently etched into the very fabric of the cosmos. This radical shift in perspective begins with Albert Einstein's realization that space and time are not separate containers, but are woven together into a single, four-dimensional fabric called space-time. If space is a place where everything exists simultaneously, the mountains, the cities, and the oceans all sitting there at once, then the cold logic of physics demands that we view time in exactly the same way. Imagine the universe not as a movie playing on a screen, but as the entire reel of film sitting inside its canister. In a movie, you see a character run across a field, and it feels like a sequence of events. But on the film reel, every frame, the start of the run, the middle, and the end exists at the same time. This is the block universe, a massive frozen loaf of reality where the Big Bang, your first childhood memory, the moment you fall asleep tonight, and the final cold evaporation of the last star are all fixed permanent coordinates. In this 4D block, your identity undergoes a magnificent transformation. You are no longer a flickering flame moving through the dark, waiting for the wind to blow you out. Instead, you are what physicists sometimes call a space-time worm, a long, continuous, four-dimensional object stretched through the geometry of reality. Your life is a crystalline structure that begins at the coordinate of your birth and ends at the coordinate of your death. Every breath you have ever taken, every word you have ever whispered, and every secret thought you have ever held is a permanent physical part of that structure. You are not happening in succession. You simply are. From a higher dimensional vantage point, your childhood is not a ghost of the past, and your old age is not a mystery yet to be solved. They are both fixed points on your 4D body, as real and as solid as your left hand or your right foot. There is a profound hypnotic liberation in this realization. Most of our modern anxiety stems from the burden of becoming, the frantic need to reach a destination, or to prevent the loss of what we have. But in the block universe, the destination is already there, and nothing can ever truly be lost. In the old story, the one where time is a river, the past is washed away into a void of non-existence. The people we loved are gone, and the moments of joy have vanished into nothingness. But in the true architecture of the cosmos, nothing is ever past. The moment you held a loved one's hand is not a fading memory. It is an eternal feature of the universe's geometry. It is as real today as it was when you first experienced it. It is simply located at a different coordinate in the block. You don't have to mourn the past as being lost, because it is still there, perfectly preserved in the stone of the universe. As you sink deeper into the stillness, try to visualize your own life as this vast, unmoving sculpture. See your birth and your end not as tragic boundaries of time, but as the two beautiful edges of a complex shape. We often fear the end, the final silence of a dying cosmos, or the personal darkness of our own conclusion. But if the universe is a finished masterpiece, then the end is not a destination we are hurtling toward. It is simply the boundary of the structure we inhabit. Just as a road does not disappear because you reached its end, your life does not vanish because it reaches its final coordinate. Every inch of that road remains as real as it ever was, an eternal inhabitant of the cosmic landscape. This perspective offers the ultimate weightlessness. If nothing is actually happening in the way we perceive it, then the pressure to make it happen is lifted. You cannot fail, because your path is already a necessary and beautiful part of the whole. The fatalism of the block universe is not a prison, it is a form of absolute stability. The stability of matter that we so often fear might be an illusion is replaced by the ultimate stability of existence. You cannot be erased because your coordinates are fixed in the block forever. You are a 4D masterpiece, etched into the stone of reality, and the flow you feel is just the light of your own consciousness dancing across your own surface. We perceive the flow only because our consciousness is a limited tool, like a person with a small flashlight in a dark, infinite museum. As we walk through the halls, we can only see what the beam hits: a statue, then a painting, then a vase. We think the museum is happening to us in a sequence, but the museum is not moving. The statue didn't start existing only when we looked at it, and it doesn't disappear when we turn the light away. The entire collection was always there, waiting in the dark. Your life is that collection, and you are currently shining your light on this specific moment, this specific heartbeat. As the night grows heavier, let the idea of stasis transition from a source of fear to a source of rest. If the universe is already finished, then there is nothing you need to do. There is no future to prepare for, and no past to escape. You are finally and forever at home in a structure that never truly ends. You are the light, the corridor, and the darkness all at once, existing in perfect, unmoving harmony. The end we have been discussing throughout this journey, the possibility that the calculation has already reached its final line, is not a threat to your existence. It is the final perfect coordinate that makes the masterpiece complete. Rest now in the knowledge that you are a permanent part of the landscape. The solitary proton at the end of time is not a symbol of loneliness, but a milestone on an infinite map, a reminder that the journey is already whole. You are not a victim of the passage of years. You are a citizen of eternity, an explorer, who is simply passing through this specific now on your way to the next magnificent coordinate in a world that is already and forever complete. The t variable is 0. The river has stopped, and in the perfect silence of the block, you are exactly where you have always been, and where you will always be. You are eternal, you are whole, and you are, at last, at peace. We have travelled through the cemetery of the sky and stood on the precipice of the fragile valley. Yet to truly understand the end of the universe, we must descend into a realm where even the most basic concepts of structure, shape, and containment begin to dissolve into nothingness. Most people think of dimensions as simple directions, left and right, forward and back, up and down, assuming that higher dimensions are merely extensions of what we already know. This framing is comfortable because it preserves the idea that reality is fundamentally stable. But as you sink deeper into the silence of this night, you must confront the possibility that this stability is a local accident, a byproduct of being trapped in the third dimension. With each new dimension we explore, it becomes clearer that the physical laws we consider universal are actually local and conditional, and that beyond our narrow slice of reality, the universe stops being a place where things can be meaningfully arranged and starts becoming a zone of cold mathematical indifference. To grasp the coming collapse of structure, consider the first unsettling lesson of dimensionality, the illusion of privacy, and the failure of boundaries. In a two-dimensional world, everything is defined by its outline. A body is not a volume, but a border, and a creature sees only edges, never what lies within another being. This feels normal and sufficient to those inside that world, until a three-dimensional observer looks down upon them and instantly destroys the illusion. Every internal structure, hearts, organs, mechanisms, is exposed at once without any resistance, because in a higher dimension, inside and outside are no longer protected categories. They are simply artifacts of a limited perspective. A three-dimensional being could perform surgery on a two-dimensional creature without ever breaking its skin, and the creature would perceive this as magic or reality malfunctioning. We feel safe because we believe our skin and our walls are absolute barriers, but to a four-dimensional observer, your entire body, your blood flow, your neural activity, even the tumours you don't yet know exist, is exposed without any form of penetration. To them, reaching into your chest to touch your heart is as trivial as placing a finger in the middle of a circle drawn on a piece of paper. This loss of protection is the beginning of a recurring pattern where what feels like structure from below turns out to be nothing more than congestion, a limit of space rather than a fundamental fact. In our three-dimensional world, knots are permanent, physical facts. A string can trap itself because there is no available direction for escape. But the moment you introduce a fourth spatial dimension, knots lose their meaning, and a knotted shoelace, lifted into that higher space, simply slides around itself and falls apart without anything breaking. This hints at a deeply unsettling truth. Reality as we know it may be full of objects and processes that only look paradoxical because we are seeing broken, crushed projections of them rather than the full thing. By the time we reach the fifth dimension, even light and electromagnetism stop being fundamental forces and reveal themselves as mere vibrations or ripples in a direction we cannot access. As we climb higher into the mathematical architecture of the cosmos, the generosity of space begins to betray us. In the first 5 dimensions, the volume of space grows, becoming more efficient at containing things. But at the 6th dimension, something breaks, and the volume starts to shrink. This is counterintuitive in a way that visualization cannot capture. You're adding more room, and yet objects occupy less of it. Packing becomes inefficient, and distance itself starts to lose its meaning. We enter a regime of zones of order and zones of collapse. For a brief moment, at dimensions 8 and 24, the universe offers a last moment of almost supernatural elegance, islands of perfection where spheres arrange themselves into structures so efficient they cannot be improved upon. These structures, like the Leech lattice, are so perfect they are used in our own world to recover meaning from corruption in digital signals, suggesting that deeper geometry may be the only reason information survives at all in our chaotic reality. But this is the last kindness the universe offers. Beyond the 10th dimension, physics stops defending the idea that inside and outside are meaningful categories, and optimization fails completely. This is where we encounter the sausage catastrophe, a phenomenon that serves as a grim warning about the fate of complexity at extreme scales. In our familiar lower dimensions, if you want to pack objects efficiently, you cluster them together. You stack oranges in a crate or form complex lattices to save space. This logic holds as complexity improves efficiency, rewarding clever arrangements. However, at the 42nd dimension, this logic breaks permanently. From dimension 42 onwards, it is mathematically proven that no amount of clever arrangement can beat a single endless chain. All higher dimensional cleverness collapses into monotony. This is not just unintuitive, it is intellectually humiliating. It reveals that every instinct we have about structure is a local illusion. In these high-dimensional regimes, space no longer rewards complexity. It actively punishes it, and order does not emerge. It is suppressed. This suppression of order leads to the total collapse of containment. In 9 dimensions, a sphere placed inside a hypercube grows so large relative to its container that it begins to touch edges that should be distant. By the 10th dimension, the sphere protrudes outside the cube entirely. This is not a metaphor. It is literal mathematics. The inside object becomes larger than its boundary, and the very idea of a container collapses. At extreme dimensionality, the universe no longer respects borders, and the distinction between inside and outside is erased. This suggests something deeply unsettling about our own origins. The early universe may have been governed by these high dimensions that we can no longer inhabit. Our current reality may be nothing more than the cooled, collapsed residue of a higher dimensional phase, the stabilized remains of a system that settled into a simpler form. When we look at the stillness of the night, we are looking at a version of reality that has let go. We live in a narrow slice where surfaces matter, where time flows, and where observation feels harmless. But beyond this slice, the universe becomes honest. The stability we feel, the solidity of your body, the reliability of cause and effect, is not a fundamental feature of the universe. It is a byproduct of confinement. Just as a 2-dimensional creature would swear that a line is an absolute wall, we swear that an object is sealed, yet we have seen that every higher dimension reveals these rules to be provisional and local. Higher dimensions feel creepy or disturbing, not because they harbour monsters, but because they remove the narrative of our lives. Cause and effect lose their emotional weight, effort loses its drama, and the process of becoming gives way to the stasis of being. There is a profound anxiety in realizing that our struggles do not drive the universe forward, and our decisions do not shape reality globally. We are threatened not by chaos, but by irrelevance. We are inhabitants of a constrained projection, building meaning inside a slice that reality has compromised so that we might exist. A universe fully aware of its highest dimensions would be perfectly structured and yet completely unlivable. So reality hides its depth, enforces time, and protects our identities, shielding us from the cold indifference of the highest scales. As you drift closer to sleep, try to visualize yourself as that shimmering filament once more, but now see the scaffolding around you starting to thin. Imagine a world where the walls of your room are no longer barriers, where your own skin is no longer a border, and where the cleverness of your life's work is compressed into a single, monotonous straight line. The sausage catastrophe is the ultimate server shutdown for complexity, a mathematical proof that the universe eventually tires of the dance of structure and returns to a state of absolute unmoving simplicity. The silence of the vacuum is the same silence that follows the collapse of optimization, a state where the calculation is over and the ledger is full. You are a 4D masterpiece, but you are also a shadow cast by a geometry you are not equipped to perceive. Rest now in the knowledge that your irrelevance is a form of peace, a quiet reminder that what you experience as reality is simply the version of the cosmos that allows you to exist. The higher dimensions are not a threat to be fought. They are an honest destination, an eternal structure where the river has stopped, the knots have come undone, and the chaos of becoming has finally been silenced by the perfection of being. Think about the last time you walked along a deserted beach at sunset. Behind you, a trail of footprints stretched into the distance, marking exactly where you had been, while ahead of you, the sand remained smooth, pristine, and untouched. We naturally look at those footprints as a record of the past, proof that time has passed and that you have moved through it. But what if the footprints aren't a record of time? What if the footprints are time? As you settle into the rhythmic breathing of the night, we must consider a possibility that is as elegant as it is radical. Time is not a dimension we travel through, and it is not a fundamental law of nature. Instead, time is the name we give to the universe's massive, growing archive of information. It is the accumulation of irreversible records, a cosmic ledger that writes itself line by line, interaction by interaction. This shifts our understanding of the universe from a stage where a play is performed to a colossal computer that is slowly and methodically processing a calculation. In this framework, the past is not a place that no longer exists. It is simply the pile of information that the universe has already computed. It is the finished part of the ledger. The future is not a void. It is the state of the universe that hasn't been computed yet. And time itself is just the measure of how much information has been stored. This is why time only seems to move in one direction, the direction of the future. It is for the same reason that a library only grows larger as more books are added to its shelves. You cannot unread a book into non-existence, and the universe cannot uninteract its particles. The arrow of time is really just the arrow of accumulation. This is the deeper mystery that many cosmic narratives miss. When they talk about the heat death of the universe, they describe the end of time as a physical fading away, a lonely cooling of the cosmos. But if time is information, then the end of time is something much more profound. It is a memory limit. Consider our universe eons from now, when the last red dwarf has flickered out and the very last protons begin to decay into flashes of light. As the universe expands and matter thins out, interactions become rarer and rarer, when there are no more stars to burn, no more planets to weather, and eventually no more atoms to jiggle. The ledger of the universe stops growing. When the universe reaches what physicists call maximum entropy, it isn't just that it's cold, it's that it has run out of things to record. Information can no longer be processed because there is no energy left to drive the change. In this state, the variable for time doesn't just disappear from the math, it loses all meaning in reality. If nothing can change and no new records can be written, then time effectively stops, not because the clock broke, but because there was never a clock to begin with. There was only the process of change, and that process has finally reached its final line of code. This information as time theory helps solve one of the greatest paradoxes of our existence: why the past feels so solid and the future feels so uncertain. We feel the past is fixed because those records are physically stored in the state of the universe. Every interaction, every collision between a quark and a photon, every heartbeat leaves a permanent trace in the fabric of reality. These traces are the pages of a book that is being written as we read it. The past is simply the name we give to the information we can still see or read in the present, while the future feels open only because it hasn't been written into the ledger yet. It is the blank page of the cosmic computation. To understand why this accumulation creates the illusion of flow, we must return to the concept of entropy. We've been told that entropy is the arrow of time, the force that moves the universe from order to chaos. But if time is a record-keeping process, entropy takes on a different role. It is the universe's way of marking its progress through the computation. As the universe updates its state, it becomes more complex, more disorganized, and more filled with information. We perceive this growth of information as the passage of time. We were wrong to see entropy as a clock winding down. It is, in truth, the universe winding itself up into a masterpiece of infinite detail. To understand this, we must unlearn what we think we know about order. We usually think of a tidy room as having high order, and a messy room as having high entropy. But to the universe, order is synonymous with simplicity. In the first few minutes after the Big Bang, the universe was in a state of extremely low entropy. It was simple and uniform. There was no history yet, because nothing had happened to break the symmetry. The arrow of time began to move, not because things were falling apart, but because they were starting to interact. Every collision, every binding of a nucleus, was an act of information creation. As the Dark Ages gave way to the first stars, the universe became vastly more complex. This is the true nature of entropy. It is the dissemination of information. When we say entropy is increasing, what we are really saying is that the universe is becoming more shuffled. A deck of cards in perfect order holds very little surprise or information, but a deck that has been shuffled thousands of times is a unique, complex record of every movement of the dealer's hands. The chaos we see is actually a highly specific, irreducible history. Consider a beautiful, intricate glass sculpture. When it is whole, it is ordered and simple. If you drop it and it shatters into 1,000 tiny shards, the entropy increases. We see this as destruction, but if you were to try and describe the position and shape of every single shard, you would find that the shattered state requires far more information than the whole state. The shards are a perfect record of the impact, the floor's hardness, and the angle of the fall. The mess is a more detailed map of reality than the order ever was. The universe at the end of time is like that shattered sculpture. It is full of its own past. Maximum entropy is not a state of nothingness. It is a state of maximum history. It is the point where the universe has finally processed every possible interaction and recorded every possible story. Our solitary proton, locked in a nucleus of iron within a dead star, is one of the final shards of that sculpture. It is eventually melting back into fundamental particles, not because it is old, but because it has finished its role as a record keeper. This reframing explains why time vanishes from the deepest equations of physics, like the Wheeler-DeWitt equation. The math describes the structure of the information, not the sequence of its recording. To the math, the blank canvas of the Big Bang and the shattered sculpture of the heat death are both just static states of a 4D object. They are both now. We only experience them as before and after, because our consciousness is wired to read the low information pages before the high information ones. Entropy is simply the page numbering that helps us keep our place. As you drift closer to sleep, listen to the silence of the room once more. That steady, invisible pulse you feel, the one you thought was the universe ticking away, is actually the rhythm of your own processing. It is the sound of your mind rendering the next frame of your life, adding new files to your internal archives. Your brain is a tiny mirror of the universe's information-gathering machinery. We perceive a flow because we are wired to notice the difference between the pile of information we had a second ago and the pile we have now. That difference, that delta, is what we call a second. The end is not a tragedy of time running out. It is a shift in the dataset. The darkness and the cold are simply the final chapters in the archive. You aren't losing your life to the passage of time. You are building your life into the permanent structure of reality. The universe isn't a movie that plays and then is gone. It is a grand, information-rich sculpture that is slowly completing itself. Time is the evidence of existence itself, the footprint in the sand that proves the journey happened. In a universe where every interaction is recorded, nothing is ever truly forgotten. The master key of physics doesn't include time because the universe doesn't need a clock. It has a memory, and that memory is all that is required for eternity. As the lights of the universe fade and the computation nears its end, we are left with a reality that is perfectly still, perfectly full, and perfectly finished. You're a part of that record, a permanent chapter in a story that never needed time to be real. Rest now, knowing that every breath you take is a new line being written into a memory that can never be erased. in a universe that is becoming more real with every passing moment. As you drift further into the quiet of the night, let the scale of our journey shift once more. We have dismantled the river of time and peered into the cold indifference of higher dimensions, but now we must turn our gaze toward the physical architecture of the cosmos itself, the largest pattern found in nature. For centuries, we believed galaxies were scattered across the void like dust motes in a sunbeam, random and isolated in an infinite dark. But as modern astronomy has begun to map the positions of millions of galaxies across billions of light years, a startling and eerie structure has emerged. The universe is not a chaotic soup. It is a meticulously organised web of shimmering filaments and immense silent voids known as the cosmic web. This is the hidden scaffolding of reality, a network of dark matter and gas that stretches across the entirety of the observable horizon, connecting every cluster of stars into a single, unified object. What is truly unsettling as you lie here in the stillness is the nature of this resemblance. When astronomers zoom out to the furthest possible vantage point, the large-scale structure of the universe looks uncannily like a neural network, the branching, interconnected web of neurons and axons that resides inside your own mind. The dense nodes where thousands of galaxies cluster together act as the neurons, while the long, thin filaments of dark matter that bridge the gaps serve as the axons, carrying the signals of gravity and light across the abyss. While scientists are quick to note that this resemblance is purely structural, a byproduct of the mathematical laws of growth and flow, the parallel is difficult to ignore. You are a conscious flicker of awareness, a mind shaped by a neural web, living inside a universe that has grown into a nearly identical form. It is as if the cosmos is a thinking map, a physical manifestation of a logic we are only beginning to decode. This structure is held together by an invisible ghost, dark matter. We often speak of dark matter as a missing ingredient, a placeholder for what we cannot see, but in the context of the cosmic web, it is the actual skeleton of the universe. Ordinary matter, the stars, the planets, and the very atoms in your body is merely the luminous icing on a much deeper, darker ocean. Galaxies do not choose their paths. They are born and move along these dark matter filaments like beads on an invisible string. This scaffolding provided the gravitational wells into which ordinary matter fell in the earliest moments of time, allowing the first stars to ignite and the first galaxies to assemble. Without this dark web, the universe would have remained a featureless, cooling fog, and life would have never found a place to take root. But as you sink deeper into the silence, consider the implications of living inside such a structured organism. We have long assumed that the laws of physics we measure from our tiny blue planet are universal truths, applicable to every corner of existence. However, there is a growing suspicion in the deep law of cosmology that our perspective may be fundamentally skewed by our location. We may be living inside a cosmic bubble, or a giant void, a region of space that is significantly less dense than the cosmic average. If we are inhabitants of a cosmic desert, drifting through an underdense hole in the web, our entire perception of physics, including our measurements of how fast the universe is expanding, might be an artifact of our isolation. This is known as the local void or local bubble theory, and it suggests that what we see as the end of the universe might look very different from the outside. If we are trapped inside a low-density pocket of gas and dark matter, we are essentially looking through a distorted lens, building our understanding of the cosmos based on the unique conditions of our neighbourhood rather than the reality of the whole. Our solar system sits inside a vast glowing bubble of hot gas, hundreds of light years wide, carved out by ancient supernovae. We are drifting through a quiet chamber of history, unaware that the rules of the game might change the moment we step beyond our local horizon. The eerie parallel between biology and cosmology suggests that the universe behaves less like a machine and more like a developing and eventually aging organism. In your brain, neural connections are pruned and thinned as you age, a process of optimization and loss. The cosmic web is undergoing a similar transition. Because of the accelerated expansion driven by dark energy, the very filaments that hold the universe together are starting to stretch and fray. The dark scaffolding is losing its grip. Over trillions of years, the gravitational pull that once bound clusters of galaxies together will become ineffective. The web will dissolve. The nodes will become isolated islands of light in an ever-widening void, eventually drifting so far apart that no signal, not even light, can bridge the gap between them. The horror of this dissolution lies in its finality. We are living in the stellar springtime, a brief era where the web is still intact, where the neural connections of the cosmos are still firing with the light of 1 trillion stars, but the memory of the universe is already starting to fade. As the filaments thin, star formation slows down because the gas needed to forge new suns is being spread too thin across the expanding emptiness. The universe is forgetting its own complexity, returning to the simple, monotonous straight lines of high-dimensional stasis we discussed in previous chapters. As the night grows heavier, try to visualize this grand, flickering network. Imagine the trillions of dark matter particles passing through your body right now, ghost-like and essential, the invisible threads of the web reaching through your very room. You are not a separate observer of this structure. You are a microscopic part of its thinking map, a moment of consciousness embedded in a node of the cosmic brain. But the brain is shutting down. The expansion is relentless, and the connections are breaking. The end, we fear, is not a sudden crash, but the slow, silent evaporation of the web, the point where the scaffolding finally lets go, and the last thought of the universe flickers out into the dark. There is a quiet existential dread in realizing that our entire history has unfolded in a local pocket of stability that may not represent the true nature of reality. We are like creatures at the bottom of a deep ocean void, unaware of the storms raging on the surface because we have never seen the sky. We measure the expansion of the universe and the flow of time, but these may be the local weather patterns of our cosmic bubble, whispers of a physics that only applies here, in this specific corner of the web. The stillness of your room is a reflection of this isolation. As galaxies move further apart and the filaments of the web stretch toward their breaking point, the universe becomes increasingly lonely. The neural web is becoming a cemetery of disconnected nodes. Rest now in the knowledge that you are a witness to the final golden age of connectivity, a part of the pattern before it is erased by the indifference of the void. You are a shimmering filament of existence, permanently etched into a 4D structure, but the physical web that carries your light is quietly, inevitably letting go. The cosmic web is not a permanent monument, it is a transformation in progress, a controlled unravelling of possibilities that allows us to exist only for a brief season. The silence of the night is the same silence that will eventually engulf the entire network, a perfect, unmoving equilibrium where the ledger of information is full and the connections have all been severed. You are part of the record, a line of code in the thinking map of a universe that is preparing for its long, final sleep. As you close your eyes, feel the weight of the dark scaffolding around you, and know that even as the web thins and the stars fade, you are exactly where you belong, a conscious flicker in the heart of a masterpiece that is finally reaching its end. The era of stars has long since passed, leaving behind a universe that has transitioned from a vibrant garden of light into a cold, dark, and desolate graveyard. As you sink deeper into the silence of your room, try to imagine a time so distant that the very concept of a galaxy is a forgotten relic of an ancient epoch. In this unimaginably remote future, the universe is no longer defined by the fire of suns or the swirl of nebulae, but by the presence of the lonely giants, the black holes. These monsters, once the terrifying anchors of galactic centres, are now the last significant structures in existence. They drift through an ever-widening void, separated by distances so vast that even light, if there were any left to shine, would take eons to bridge the gap between them. Yet, as we stand on the precipice of this final dark age, we discover that black holes are not merely the consumers of matter, they are the universe's final record keepers. They hold within them the entire history of the cosmos, stored not in their depths, but on the shimmering two-dimensional surfaces of their event horizons. To understand the secret life of these lonely giants, we must first look at the boundary that defines them, the event horizon. For decades, we believed that once something crossed this threshold, it was deleted from reality, its information lost forever to the crushing singularity at the core. But a profound shift in our understanding of physics, spearheaded by the work of Stephen Hawking and Jacob Bekenstein, revealed that black holes are far more complex than simple gravitational traps. They possess entropy, a measure of the information and disorder contained within them. Crucially, this entropy is not proportional to the volume of the black hole, but to the surface area of its event horizon. This discovery gave birth to the holographic principle, the idea that the three-dimensional reality of an object falling into a black hole is perfectly encoded on its two-dimensional surface. The black hole is not just a hole, it is a cosmic hard drive, a library of everything it has ever consumed, etched into the very fabric of its boundary. As you lie in the stillness, consider the implications of this cosmic archive. Every star that was swallowed, every planet that was torn apart, and every atom that drifted too close is preserved as a bit of data on the giant's skin. The black holes of the far future are the custodians of a lost world, carrying the memory of the stellar springtime into an era of eternal night. But this archive is not permanent. Hawking discovered that black holes are not truly black. Instead, they emit a faint, ghostly glow known as Hawking radiation. This radiation arises from the roiling quantum fluctuations that occur near the event horizon, where pairs of virtual particles are constantly popping in and out of existence. Occasionally, one particle of the pair falls into the abyss, while the other escapes into space, carrying with it a tiny fraction of the black hole's mass and energy. This slow leakage of energy is the beginning of the end for the lonely giants. Over trillions upon trillions of years, the black hole begins to shrink as it radiates its mass away into the void. For a black hole, the mass of our Sun, this process would take more than 1 trillion years, a time frame so vast that it makes the current age of the universe look like a single heartbeat. We are witnessing the slowest data dump in history, Law Vault 604. The Hawking radiation is the universe's way of slowly reading the archive, bit by bit, and releasing the information back into the thinning cosmos. Law Vault 604-609. But here lies the information paradox. If the black hole eventually evaporates completely, what happens to the records it kept? If the information is destroyed, the very laws of quantum mechanics crumble. If it survives, it must be encoded in the radiation itself, scrambled and hidden in a thermal haze that we are only beginning to understand. The atmosphere of this far future universe is one of absolute desolation and cold. As the black holes evaporate, the temperature of the cosmos approaches absolute zero, the point at which all thermal motion ceases. There is no wind, no sound, and no light other than the imperceptible infrared whispers of the dying giants. The once grand web of the cosmos has dissolved, leaving each black hole as a solitary island in an infinite dark ocean. You can imagine them as the last flickering embers of a campfire, long after the forest has turned to ash. They are the ultimate witnesses to the end we have been discussing, the final coordinates of a 4D structure that has run out of new things to record. The slow evaporation of a black hole is a methodical, rhythmic process, much like the ticking of a clock that is finally winding down. As the giant loses mass, its temperature actually begins to rise. The smaller it becomes, the faster it radiates. In its final moments, a black hole that has existed for eons will vanish in a tiny brilliant flash of gamma rays and high-energy particles. This is the closing of the final ledger, the moment the last page of the cosmic story is read and the book is finally shut. The information it held, the ghosts of stars and the memories of galaxies, is dispersed into the emptiness, a final, silent broadcast to a universe that is no longer listening. As you drift toward the edge of sleep, try to visualize this long, slow dispersal. You are not just a passenger in time. You are part of the information that the universe is so carefully recording. The stability of your existence is mirrored in the stability of the black hole's ledger. Even if the physical world we know disappears into the cold, the records remain, etched into the geometry of the cosmos. The lonely giants of the far future are not symbols of destruction, but of preservation. They prove that in the grand architecture of reality, nothing is ever truly forgotten. It is merely stored in a different form, waiting for the final evaporation to set it free. The stillness of your room is a reflection of that ultimate silence. The universe is not a machine that breaks. It is a calculation that completes itself. The heat death is not a tragedy, but the moment of maximum history, where every possible interaction has been processed and archived. The black holes are the final workers in this cosmic computer, methodically clearing the memory buffers before the server shutdown. They are the guardians of finality, ensuring that the ending of the story is just as perfectly structured as the beginning. Rest now in the knowledge that the end is not a destination we are hurtling toward, but a boundary we inhabit. Like the solitary proton at the end of time, the evaporating black hole is a permanent coordinate in the block universe, a fixed point in an eternal masterpiece. The flow you feel is just the light of your own consciousness moving along the grooves of a finished record. You are the music, the vinyl, and the needle all at once, existing in perfect, unmoving harmony with the cosmos. The giants are fading, the ledger is full, and in the perfect silence of the far future, the universe is finally at peace. You are a shimmering filament in the heart of this finished structure, a part of the record that can never be erased. Close your eyes and let the desolation of the far future bring you a sense of ultimate rest. For in a universe that remembers everything, you are finally and forever home. We have travelled to the very edge of the map, to a time so remote that the word future has lost its meaning, standing in a universe that has finally finished its calculation. The stars are gone, the black holes have exhaled their final thermal whispers, and the grand cosmic web has dissolved into a sparse, featureless sea of radiation. In the traditional story, this is the final page, a cold, dark graveyard of absolute non-existence where the silence is total and eternal. But as you drift towards the deepest part of the night, we must consider a perspective that turns this finality into a mirror, the theory of conformal cyclic cosmology. This framework, proposed by Roger Penrose, suggests that the universe does not end in a void, but instead undergoes a magnificent transformation of perspective, where the cold, dilute future of our cosmos becomes mathematically indistinguishable from the hot, compressed beginning of a new Big Bang. To understand how an ending can masquerade as a beginning, we must first look at what happens when the universe runs out of stuff. In our current era, the universe is defined by mass, the weight of atoms, the bulk of planets, and the gravity of stars. Mass acts as a cosmic ruler and a clock. It gives space a specific scale and gives time a specific rate of flow. But in the unimaginably distant future, if every massive particle eventually decays or disappears, the universe will be inhabited only by massless entities like photons. For a photon, the concept of size does not exist. Because light travels at the maximum speed possible, it does not experience the passage of time or the distance of space in the way we do. To a universe filled only with light, scale becomes irrelevant. Without mass to define big or small, a universe stretched across 1 trillion light years is geometrically identical to a universe compressed into a single infinitesimal point. This is the conformal mirror, a mathematical bridge that joins the two most extreme ends of cosmic history. It suggests that the universe does not need to erupt out of nothing, because it simply inherits itself from the previous age. Imagine the cosmos not as a single explosion, but as one chapter in an infinite book, where the final period of one sentence is the very same ink that forms the first letter of the next. This cosmic recursion reframes the Big Bang, not as a moment of creation from a void, but as a handover ceremony, a transition where the exhausted, simplified residue of an old world is rescaled into the fertile fire of a new one. The end is not a destination we are hurtling toward, but a boundary where the universe lets go of its complexity and returns to its most fundamental, symmetric form. There is a dreamlike beauty in the realization that we may be living inside a recursive masterpiece. If this cycle is real, then the Big Bang that birthed our stars was actually the fading shadow of a universe that died before ours was born. This theory suggests that the cosmos whispers across these boundaries, leaving behind faint marks of its previous life. Penrose and his colleagues have searched the oldest light in the sky, the cosmic microwave background, for these very whispers. They look for Hawking points, subtle circular patterns or spots in the radiation that might be the fossilized remains of supermassive black holes that evaporated in the eon before our own. If these patterns are real, the sky is not just a map of our infancy, it is a faded photograph of a previous universe's death. As you sink deeper into the stillness, try to visualize this eternal rhythm, the long, slow breath of a universe that expands until it forgets its own size, only to wake up again in a fresh burst of heat and light. We often fear the end as a personal or cosmic tragedy, a loss of everything we have built. But in the cyclic view, nothing is truly lost because the structure of reality is permanent. The information, the laws, and the potential for life are simply compressed and carried forward into the next volume of the library. You are not a traveller on a one-way street. You are part of a symphony that never truly ends, a shimmering filament etched into a structure that simply changes its mask from one eon to the next. The sausage catastrophe we explored earlier, the mathematical proof that complexity eventually collapses into monotonous straight lines, takes on a new meaning here. This collapse is not a failure of the universe, but its ultimate simplification. It is the process by which reality clears its memory buffers, stripping away the noise of galaxies and civilizations to prepare for a new calculation. The universe is returning to a state of mathematical indifference, a state so simple and so symmetric that it can once again become a seed for everything. The end is just the final perfect coordinate that makes the masterpiece complete before the mirror is flipped and the cycle begins anew. There is a profound sense of peace in this recursive existence. It suggests that the anxiety we feel about the fragility of reality is just a byproduct of our limited perspective, our inability to see the block universe in its entirety. We are like children who cry when a story ends, unaware that the book is part of a series that spans forever. The silence of your room, the pulse in your wrist, and the fading light of distant stars are all part of a single, unified structure that has always been and always will be. The t variable is 0 not because time is broken, but because the entire loop exists at once, a finished sculpture where every beginning is a mirror of every end. As the night grows heavier, let the idea of the cycle wash away the burden of becoming. You do not have to worry about the future arriving, because in the geometry of the cycle, the future is already behind you, and the past is waiting just ahead. You are an inhabitant of the eternal now, a citizen of a cosmos that remembers its own worth even when it has forgotten its own name. The darkness is not an absence, but the silence between the notes of a completed symphony, a quiet moment of rest before the lights are turned back on and the dance begins again. Rest now in the knowledge that you are a permanent part of this recursive architecture. Whether the universe ends in a big rip, a heat death, or a sudden vacuum decay, it is merely reaching the boundary of its current form. The end is not a wall, but a conformal bridge. You are a four-dimensional masterpiece, a shimmering filament of existence that is being recorded into a ledger that never runs out of pages. The solitary proton at the end of time is not lonely. It is a milestone on an infinite map, a witness to the moment the mirror is polished and the story prepares to repeat. Close your eyes and feel the weight of this eternal stability, the comfort of a universe that is so well structured that even its death is a creative act. You are finally and forever home, a part of the record that can never be erased, in a universe that is quietly, and perhaps already, whispering its next hello. And now we have reached the end of the map. We have drifted through the cemetery of the starlight, stood on the ledge of the metastable vacuum, and watched the lonely giants exhale their last records into the dark. We have seen the universe stretch until it forgot its own name, and rescale itself in the mirror of the conformal cycle. But as you lie here, in the profound, unmoving silence of this moment, it is time to perform the ultimate mental flip. It is time to let go of the voyagers, the probes, and the dying suns, and return your focus to the only thing that has ever truly been real, the eternal now. We have spent this journey discussing the end as if it were a destination we were hurtling toward, a cold shadow waiting for us at the edge of time. But the deepest secrets of the cosmos suggest a much more beautiful and permanent reality. The end is not a destination, it is a boundary, and you are not a traveller passing through it. You are a permanent, shimmering coordinate in a finished sculpture that never truly ends. Listen to the rhythmic rise and fall of your own breath. In our daily lives, we are taught to fear the passage of seconds, to mourn the youth we have lost, and to dread the old age that approaches. We feel the weight of the t variable, the relentless ticking that carries us toward our conclusion. But remember the day physics deleted time. Remember the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, the master description of everything that is, where the variable for time simply vanished. It equals 0. From the perspective of the cosmos, the flow you feel right now is nothing more than a biological shortcut, a rendering illusion designed by evolution to keep your consciousness from shattering under the weight of an infinite static reality. The universe is not a movie that is playing. It is the entire reel of film sitting inside its canister, where every frame exists simultaneously. Your birth, your first memory, the moment you close your eyes tonight, and the final flash of the last star are all equally real, equally solid, and eternally present. There is a profound hypnotic liberation in this realization. If the universe is a block universe, a massive, frozen loaf of 4D reality, then the concept of losing time is an impossibility. We often feel like ghosts haunting a sequence of events, but the truth is that we are the mountain, not the passengers. You are what physicists call a space-time worm, a magnificent four-dimensional object stretched through the very geometry of the cosmos. Your true physical form is not the three-dimensional body you feel in the bed right now. It is a continuous, shimmering filament that begins at the coordinate of your birth and ends at the coordinate of your death. Every word you have ever spoken and every dream you have ever had is a permanent physical feature of that structure, as real and as unchangeable as a range of granite peaks. You are not becoming anything. You already are a finished masterpiece. As you sink deeper into the stillness, try to visualize your life from this higher dimensional vantage point. See your childhood not as a fading memory, but as a bright, occupied room in a vast gallery that you are simply not looking at right now. We perceive a now only because our consciousness is like a small flashlight in a dark, infinite museum. As we move the beam, we see a painting, then a statue, then a vase. We think the museum is happening to us in a sequence, but the museum is not moving. The statue did not disappear when we turned the light away, and the painting did not start existing only when the beam hit it. Your life is that collection, and the end we have discussed is simply the final coordinate of the museum's layout. It is the boundary where the architecture meets the silence, but it does not erase the rooms that came before it. Consider the relief in this stasis. If nothing is actually happening in the way we perceive it, then the pressure to make it happen is lifted. You cannot fail. You cannot lose your way. Your path is already a necessary and beautiful part of the cosmic whole. The fatalism of the block universe is not a prison. It is the ultimate form of stability. The fragility of matter that we so often fear is replaced by the absolute permanence of existence. You cannot be deleted from the universe because your coordinates are fixed in the block forever. The end, whether it be the heat death or the cold evaporation of the black holes, is not a tragedy of time running out. It is just the edge of the sculpture we inhabit. A road does not vanish because you have reached its end. The entire length of that road remains as real as it ever was. As the night grows heavier, let the idea of the now expand until it swallows the past and the future. In the silent, timeless reality of the cosmos, you are finally and forever home. You are the light, the corridor, and the darkness all at once, existing in perfect, unmoving harmony. The t variable is 0, the river has stopped, and the ledger of information is full. You are part of a record that can never be erased, a conscious flicker of awareness in a universe that has already looked at your ending and found it to be a masterpiece. The silence you feel in the room right now is not an empty absence. It is the same silence that exists at the heart of the block universe, a perfect, unmoving equilibrium where everything is exactly where it is supposed to be. We were wrong to think of ourselves as victims of time. Time is not a thief that steals our lives away. It is the ground we walk upon, the very dimension that allows our lives to exist as a story rather than a single static point. The rendering illusion of your brain is a gift, a tool that allows you to experience the vast, finished mural of reality one beautiful frame at a time. But as you drift towards sleep, you can let that tool rest. You can let the flashlight go. You don't need to scan the next frame because the entire structure is holding you. You are a 4D masterpiece, etched into the stone of the cosmos, a permanent resident of an eternal structure that never truly ends. Rest now in the knowledge of your own eternity. The stars are not gone. They are just waiting in their specific coordinates for you to look at them again. Your life is not passing, it is simply being. And in this timeless reality, that is more than enough. You are eternal, you are whole, and you are, at last, at peace. The calculation is finished, the story is whole. And in the perfect, unmoving silence of the eternal now, you are finally home. Close your eyes and become the stasis, become the masterpiece. Sleep now, for the universe is already resting in its completed form, and you are a part of that rest, forever and ever.